Alrighty, good morning, everyone. I am First Alert Meteorologist Courteney Jacobazzi. We are talking about Hurricane Preparedness Week, which is this week, May 4th through the 10th. Every day, the National Hurricane Center and NOAA have been partnering together to give you kind of a day-by-day information sheet, if you will, on different topics to prepare for hurricane season. And I know that you're probably like, we live in Georgia. This isn't necessarily the biggest concern for us, but if you remember last year, and I'm sure for a lot of you, it's hard to forget, we had Hurricane Helene move through and bring us all that catastrophic flooding. So even though we are far from the water, it doesn't mean that storms don't impact us. And if you are new to the state of Georgia, then just know that isn't necessarily uncommon for us to be impacted, especially by tropical storms. Hurricanes are a little more rare, and we're going to talk about that all within the next couple of minutes. So we're going to give you some information on how to kind of get ahead of hurricane season, which starts in 23 days, by the way, June 1st. Can you believe we're close to summertime already? Where's this year gone? I feel like it's flown by, but that's every year, right? Always seems like it flies. But 23 days until the official start of hurricane season. And just a reminder, our early indications of hurricane season this year are predicting another above average season, not quite as hyperactive as last year, but still above average. This is from Colorado State University. They're a crew of students studying meteorology, professors come up with this forecast every year. This isn't the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. That comes out usually at the end of May, right before the season starts. But still looking at potentially 7 hurricanes, the average is 7, forecasting 9. Last year was 11. And then major hurricanes, the average is 3. This year, Colorado State forecasting 4. And then last year we had 5 major hurricanes, which is category 3 or above. When it comes to named storms, so that's anything tropical storm or greater, the average is 14. Forecast 17, last year 18. So again, we're pretty on par with where we were last year according to this forecast. We'll see what the Hurricane Center has to say in a couple of weeks. Now, I looked back at some data about hurricanes in Georgia because while tropical storms do impact us, whether directly or indirectly, quite a bit, in fact, they have just about every year except for maybe a handful over the last 10, getting a direct hit from a hurricane isn't necessarily quite as common, but the last couple of years it has been. So last year, of course, we had Helene, which brought the catastrophic flooding, not only to us here in North Georgia, even in the Atlanta area, but all the way up into the Carolinas. We had Idalia in 2023. That is the storm that went through the Big Bend region, very similar to Helene, and then moved into North Georgia. Now, this doesn't mean that we had significant hurricane impacts here, but what this list is telling you is essentially that these storm maintained hurricane strength at least into South Georgia. Most of the time, by the time they make it into Atlanta and North Georgia, they've weakened into tropical storms. But nonetheless, these are storms that have impacted the entire state of Georgia and maintained hurricane strength at least either along the coast or into South Georgia. Hurricane Michael, can't forget that. That was a Cat 5 hurricane that completely devastated the Florida Panhandle in 2018 and then moved through our area. We had Irma in 2017 and then Hermine in 2016. So, and that again was a little closer to the coast. But nonetheless, Georgia hasn't been immune to hurricanes. It has not been a stranger to hurricanes impacting the state over the last several years. And of course, tropical storms being more frequently. And most of the time, by the time they make it into North Georgia, they do depreciate, but that doesn't mean that they don't cause a lot of damage in terms of wind and flooding rain, because those are our biggest impacts. We're thankful that we aren't surrounded by water, so we don't have to worry about storm surge, but flooding can be just as big of a concern as we saw with Helene last year. So Hurricane Preparedness Week this week is essentially an effort to get everyone ready, just kind of keep it at the top of your mind that the season is upon us. So it's time to start kind of thinking about your plan and how you and your family can prepare not only yourselves, but your home for the upcoming hurricane season, especially if it's predicted to be above average yet again. So one of the most important notes to mention is that impacts can be felt far from the coast, and that was one of the focuses on on Thursday. So when storms move in, you don't need to be coastal. Everyone, of course, always naturally thinks Florida when it comes to hurricanes, but impacts can be felt far from the coast. The wind, of course, The spin-up tornadoes, that's always a possibility, and the flooding rain, especially when storms start to slow down. As storms make their way inland, sometimes they are pushed by cold fronts that makes them speed up a little bit faster, but sometimes the friction from land, not only does that increase the tornado threat, but that also can sometimes kind of slow them down as they're weakening, and we just get dumping rain, which creates the flooding threat. Now, it is also important to listen to officials, whether those are your local meteorologists or your local emergency officials, emergency management directors in the area, any kind of emergency crews that are maybe trying to evacuate or let you know that maybe your area is in a flood zone, whether that's your home here in North Georgia. Of course, we don't have any flood zones in terms of ocean flooding, but if you live along a river, really important to listen to officials as we are watching the forecast for the river levels. But maybe if you're lucky enough to have a vacation home down along the coast, or you have family who lives along the coast, you want to be sure that you are encouraging that family to listen to officials. We've seen it happen time and time again where emergency officials, meteorologists will be telling people to evacuate. They're in an evacuation zone along the coast, and they don't leave, and that just causes really big problems, not only for emergency crews who are trying to, clean up after the storm, but also for family members. So whether we're talking about here in Georgia, or maybe you have family closer to the coast, I know a lot of you probably do, make sure that if you're kind of bringing up the discussion of hurricane season with it being around the corner, that that is always at top of mind. It is important. We're not saying to do what we say for no reason. And important to, of course, listen to us as we continue to watch forecasts with, again, especially here in North Georgia, things like river levels. Now, also, you want to have a way to receive alerts, which is arguably, they kind of go hand in hand, right? First Alert Weather app, great tool to have all the time, but as storms maybe approach this upcoming hurricane season, that will let you know timing of things like rain, storms, severe weather threat, any kind of flooding concerns. Really important to have a way to receive alerts. Severe weather, sometimes we do get those brief spin-up tornadoes in the outer bands. So start thinking about a way that you can receive alerts. Really good to have, of course, our app, but maybe something within your city as well that can give you those emergency alerts. They usually do ring to your phone automatically anyway. But just look at your resources and know what they are, and make sure that you have the correct settings turned on for those heading into the upcoming season. Now, it's also important to know your shelter options. For those of you who live here in North Georgia, this isn't necessarily quite as important, but again, if you have family or friends, maybe you're vacationing this hurricane season along the coast, just make sure that you are aware of those things. For us here in North Georgia, of course, our bigger concern is the river flooding that we saw last year that inundated some of the homes in the area. So just kind of know your backup options in case something like that happens again. That is not necessarily common for us, what we had with Helene, but of course it is naturally a possibility. It's also important to ready what we call a go bag, so kind of your emergency kit, just in case you do have to leave your home this upcoming hurricane season. So things like batteries, flashlights in case your power goes out. And this is whether you are dealing with something catastrophic or not. Of course, hurricanes, just like our thunderstorms, can knock out power, take down trees. So it's important to prepare like you would for any severe weather event, like you would for a hurricane. Important documents, always good to have. And again, I remind you, a lot of you have family, friends, vacation homes closer to the coast where storm surge is a bigger threat as well. You want to make sure that you have all of your documentation, things like insurance, health records, all those things when hurricane season is beginning, especially if you do have family, friends, or vacation homes along the coast where storm surge is a bigger threat. That's extra important for you to have those important documents. Don't leave them behind just in case, something happens where storm surge inundates your home along the coast, for those of you who have homes closer to the coast. Here at home, still a very important thing, but really you'll want to have something that has, your medication, food for your pets, because you don't want to forget about your pets, and make sure you have flashlights, batteries, all those things for more localized impacts here in North Georgia, which is usually more so a power outage issue for us. As someone who grew up in South Florida, I know firsthand. I didn't live near the coast. I lived inland enough that I wasn't in an evacuation zone, but I know what it's like to not have power for like a week because crews are just so overwhelmed trying to get you going, right? So just make sure that you have that ready to go just in case anything impacts us this season. You want to be prepared for it. Get ahead of it. Don't be that person that's at the last minute trying to get all that together when we're telling you about it later this season. We don't want it, but if it happens, it's better to be prepared for it. And of course, as I mentioned, you always want to remember your pets, right? So you have your pets with you. We don't leave them behind. We take them along with us. Make sure you have everything they need as well. They are part of our family. So we've seen it time and time again, where people leave behind their pets. We're not doing that. Always remember them. They are important. They are family. Now, today for Hurricane Preparedness Week, they're talking about kind of looking ahead after storms and using caution after the storms. So for us here, you want to, remain vigilant. Things like heat, down power lines, floodwaters. We always say turn around, don't drown. You don't want to be driving into any of those. And that's usually our biggest concern here is street flooding and river flooding. So really important that you remember those sentiments going into this upcoming season. If you have to use a generator, if your power's out and you have one, 20 plus feet away from your home. They are not safe to use indoors by any stretch of the imagination. So really important things to just keep it top of mind as we head into what is expected to be another very active hurricane season. And all the information, by the way, can be found on NOAA's website. If you type in Hurricane Preparedness Week, that link will come right up and can give you all the resources, all kinds of tips. Again, not all of them necessarily are needed for us here in North Georgia, but they're still really important to know as we've definitely not been a stranger to tropical systems the last several years. All right, everyone, I hope you make it a wonderful Friday. Enjoy the last mostly dry day. Speaking of pouring rain, we have a lot of that on the way this upcoming weekend. I'll have an updated forecast for you on Atlanta News First at noon, so be sure to tune in there. Make it a great day.
Stay up to date on your latest weather from the largest team of meteorologists in the Southeast. Download the First Alert Weather app for hour-by-hour forecasts and join us every weekday at 11:30 a.m. on ANF+. You can also text